Mm. As for me, I don't have the book. And my original copy that I translated from that original copy is in my summer house, so I couldn't find it today. So I will follow you looking at the Russian translation, and
Sure.
I think I remember all the original text,
Yes,
but it
yes.
will be funny. I will not be able to read.
That's fine, no problem. Usually I'm the one reading, but I can share it gladly if anybody wants to read, because sometimes I get a dry mouth from reading too much. So, okay, chapter 7. And we're at a very low point in the story. There was no bacon at little Princess Lily's christening. Princess Lily was the name of Violet's tiny little daughter, who was now growing larger and larger every day. But the christening was a very quiet affair with no breakfast and no guests, because the king would have it so. After he had sent the citizens back to their homes on the night the queen died, the king had walked straight to his private study and locked himself in. He had refused to see anybody or to take any interest in affairs of the state. He would not even see his little daughter or give orders as to what was to be done with her. He was too full of hopeless grief to be able to think of anything but Violet, Violet, Violet. All day long and all night, the thought of her filled his mind. Where was she? He could not believe that she would not soon knock gently on the door and come in. Only once did he send for anybody to come to his chamber, and that was on the second day after he had entered it, when he sounded a bell and sent a page for the Lord High Teller of the other from which, who had recently been appointed Lord Chancellor. The new Lord Chancellor appeared, and the king asked him, "When does the trial of my dwarf fall due?" He would not use the name Little Fat Podger, because that was a funny little name. "Sire," said the Lord Chancellor, "it falls due tomorrow, but it will not take place." "How?" exclaimed the king. "Are my orders disobeyed then?" "Sire," said the Lord Chancellor, "I regret to say that the dwarf passed away this morning in jail." Now, is this word pronounced jail? Um, I'm not sure. It's Gaol.
Yeah, I don't know. I've
I
seen
think
it
it
in print,
is.
but
I
never
think
in
it's,
speech.
yeah.
Uh-huh, uh-huh. Oh, I think Ina's here. Okay. Just a second. Okay, this is my wife. Let me introduce you to Ina. Sitting in the other room. Hello. So, we're on chapter 7. I'm not sure if you have the book, though.
I do. I
You
do.
do? Okay. Uh, Let me see. Okay, the word, strange word that's pronounced jail. Okay. And he told the king how the shock had been too much for the little fat podger, weak as he was already from having eaten nothing for a whole month except 100 bananas. He quickly grew weaker still, and never recovered himself enough even to understand that he was in jail awaiting trial for murder and high treason. He had talked continually, said his jailer, of the dreadful mistake he had made, and was troubled because Violet had not answered when he tried to explain to her. Yet he seemed, as the time went by, to grow calmer and calmer, until this morning, and the Lord Chancellor mournfully repeated the words he had used before, he had passed quietly away. But the king, when he heard this, only frowned, and commanded that the dwarf should be buried outside the common burying ground, alone, and with no inscription on his tomb, and that no man should speak his name under penalty of death. For he knew nothing of Princess Gamboy's plan, and believed, as was to be expected, that the dwarf had deliberately killed his mistress. So nobody knew what had happened, except Princess Gamboy, and though keeping quiet was not one of her habits, she kept very quiet about this. For 6 months, little Prince Lily lived with her grandfather and grandmother. They were stricken with grief for their favorite daughter, and glad to have a little baby to look after. But after 6 months, King Courtesy began to recover himself like a man and strove to take an interest in the government of his country. He no longer lived locked in his study, but went about the castle in the old way, though at first everything he came to reminded him of the Queen, and gave him a great stab of pain in the heart, and made him want to sit down. He never went near the west corner of the Queen's garden. But he soon became very fond of his little daughter, the Princess Lily. She too reminded him of Violet, but somehow that did not seem to hurt in the same way. As she grew up, she grew more and more beautiful, and it was soon plain that when she became a lady, she would be even more beautiful than Violet herself had been. You see, she had no twin, no Gamboy, with whose looks her own were magically linked. And as her heart was like Violet's and not like Gamboy's, her face blossomed into what Violet's face would have been but for Gamboy's wrinkles and old Miss Thompson's queer spell. Very soon, even before she was a year old, she and her father became the closest companions. Wherever he went, he would take her with him, perched on his shoulder or in a little sling at his side, and all the time he would talk and talk to her, long before she could understand what he was saying. As soon as she grew more sturdy on her pins, the king was very anxious that she should learn to dance. For now that the little fat Podger and the Queen were both gone, there was nobody at all to dance to him. And then a very strange thing happened. It was discovered that she could dance most beautifully without being taught a step. Quite beautifully, my dear, said the amalgamated princesses who came to the castle to see Princess Gamboy, and who didn't really care for dancing in the least, but were much too silly to say so, and have done with it. So for a long time, Princess Lily and the king were very happy together. At least she was very happy, and he was not so sad. Every evening they would sit together in his study, little Lily and her father, and he would take her on his knee and read to her all the wise and lovely things written by the men who lived a long time ago. And when they were tired of this, Princess Lily would get up and go into the light of the lamp and dance a solemn little dance of her own making, and the king would clap his hands with delight and look quite young again. She had a way of making little dresses for herself to dance in, and one evening she suddenly appeared to the king in a papery frock, all of russet brown, and danced wildly, and oh so lightly, up and down the great room, with her hair streaming out behind, as though there were a strong wind blowing. "That was my leaf dance," she cried out as she ran back to her father's knee. But he found there were tears in his eyes, and great lines of sorrow down his face, for he remembered how his queen too had used to dance like a leaf in the wind. So she never wore that dress or danced that dance again, the dance in which she pretended to be a brown autumn leaf blown along the jolly wind, blown along by the jolly wind. But she made other dresses and danced other dances. A spring dance, all in green, a summer dance, and a winter dance in white, like a snowflake. And sometimes, while the king was reading to Lily beside the shaded lamp, or Lily was dancing to the king beneath the hanging one, Princess Gamboy, pretending some errand or other, would open the door and come into the room. She would stand just inside the door looking at them, and then, if the king was reading, she would say, "Stuff." Or if little Lily was dancing, she would say, "Tch," after which she would turn on her heels and go out slamming the door. At such times, Prince Lily would ask, "What is the matter with Anne Gamboy?" And the King Courtesy would reply meekly, "I don't know, my dear. and fall silent with a cloud over his eyes. For since the queen's death, he had never had the heart to be angry with Gamboy. He knew how much Violet had loved her, and anything Violet had loved was precious to him. Therefore, he always tried his hardest to please her, although the only thanks he received would be stuff or tch. All the same, Anne Gamboy, she was Anne Gamboy now, had given up trying to stir rebellion among the king's subjects. That was something, but whether this was out of gratitude to the king for his gentleness or because she had another little plan of her own, you must guess for yourself. Luckily, the harvest had been good since the dreadful winter when the citizens had marched up to the castle or on the cold night of Queen Violet's death, so that they were happy and contented. Moreover, they were sensible citizens and soon began to discover that what a wise, unselfish ruler their king really was. And gradually they came to love him nearly as fondly as they had once loved the queen. Do you have any thoughts so far?
Well, I can start. One thing I think is interesting is that the is how he compares Princess Lily with Violet and with Gamboy. So there's this comparison of the three. And I was just wondering if you all noticed that and what you thought about that and what he was trying to signify by that.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. I mean, I also noticed that even when I was translating it, it's because, he makes a point of there being like two twins, like Princess Lily, I'm sorry, Prince Violet and Princess Gamboy, and they were like two opposites, whereas Lily did not have a twin, and so she was all herself, and that's an interesting point that usually a person has kind of two sides at least, maybe more, but there's like there's like a bright and there's like loving side to everybody, but there's also a shadow side, and they somehow coexist and somehow interact, and sometimes one side kind of tries to take over the other, and it's always kind of interesting to see how that plays out, even in my own children and in myself too. But here, Owen Barfield seems to say that Lily did not quite have it, maybe yet. Maybe she didn't have it yet. Well, I'm not sure, but how to think about it.
The other thing that struck me was how he jumps time so swiftly in one sentence. You're stuck with the king and the sadness and the baby, and suddenly the baby's a little girl, and he moves things, the author, very swiftly down the road. And once you think you're at a place where your more story will evolve right in from that moment, you're suddenly a few years ahead
Hmm.
in the next breath. So that's unusual in story making, I think.
Yeah, yeah, he kind of skips over a lot of things.
Yeah.
And what was also interesting to me is that he is hinting that all this time Gamboy was not silent. I mean, she was not like, I mean, she was probably planning something else, carefully observing what's going on with the queen, with the king, and with his daughter, and it's just interesting that she is there to observe what's going on. If she's the shadow side, it's kind of psychologically interesting that she's kind of taking in what's going on and making her own plans.
Yeah, you're waiting for her to turn against the little girl.
Yeah, yeah, almost.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's too much beauty, and she cannot tolerate that beauty very well. No.
Yeah, because the little girl is very like connected to nature. She dresses and dances like all the seasons, whereas you get like she's almost a symbol of that, you know, perfect unity of human beings with nature.
Mhm.
Whereas Gamboy is like she wears all black and she shuts herself off in, you know, the castle, and she just seems like she seems very cut off from the natural cycles of life.
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. I had another thought, but maybe I'll share it later. Okay, I'm gonna go on. Yeah, okay, closed. Yeah, chapter 8.
I have a question.
Mhm.
So I don't know if you discussed it in previous chapters, but it's interesting. It looks like Gamboy cannot stand any joy, any happiness. Like she tries to escape. When Lily dances, she just says something like stuff, and then she just goes out of the door, slamming the door. So it's interesting just what is it in her that she can't stand any joy, and she cannot, like, it looks like she cannot stand any lightheartedness, and maybe she thinks it's all silly. I don't know, but it's something in her that she's almost afraid of joy. That's what I
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah, I did notice that. It's also I find her very jealous generally. I mean, she thinks herself as a very smart
Mhm.
lady. I mean, she said that I'm not a fool. Like I'm very smart. I'm not gonna be played around and things like that.
Mhm.
But she relies so much on her reason to the degree that she does not have the life. She doesn't have life. And that's why she envies her sister. And then she starts envying Violet's daughter as well, because as you said, Jill, that she is too connected to the source of life, to nature itself. And somebody who does not have that cannot stand the sight of it, cannot stand the look of it. You have to kind of extinguish joy in any way, in any way possible.
Yeah, and that seems to be Gamboy's response. Is she does seem to be lacking joy herself, but she wants to extinguish it in Lily as well. Like she's not content to just go her own way and think Lily's silly. There's something about Lily that she's jealous of and she wants to squash it.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting that the author divided these two parts. I mean, these two sisters. One is full of joy and happiness, and the other is like the opposite. And she cannot stand it. She's almost ashamed of it. Just
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
Yeah.
ju- just just noticing that it's kind of interesting that Gamboy doesn't have anything that connects her to joyful side of life.
Mhm.
Yeah, and like you said, she calls it as silly and she's ashamed of it.
Mm-hmm.
But then she also seems to envy it at the same time. It's
Yeah,
kind
that's
of
interesting. Yeah, she feels like she's lacking it, but at the same time, she feels like she's above it.
right.
Very
Yeah.
interesting. Mm-hmm.
And it's interesting to even sometimes watch yourself. I mean, observe myself and see sometimes the two parts in yourself, and they kind of oppose each other and interact with each other sometimes. Because I don't know, sometimes I feel that I'm too smart to participate in the silliness. But then in the heart of hearts, I know that I just cannot allow myself to be as natural or, in touch with nature,
Mm-hmm.
and things like that. So,
Well, always also brings to mind we were talking, I mentioned Solzhenitsyn earlier, the line he has about the line between good and evil goes through every human heart.
Mhm.
And I think about that so often because we want to project the evil so much on others and think we don't have it. But if you really face it, you've got two sides that are in constant interplay, and you have to be very conscious to defeat the evil, a negative thought. And I don't mean in actions so much, because we can get away with all our good actions and seem good, but our own thoughts of envy or judgment, and once you look at that, you're surprised and disheartened, and then you have to start being conscious of it. So, I mean, the twin thing is such a perfect image. I'm a twin myself, but to a man. And I was just joking with someone yesterday that we're very close, but we're opposite, And it's almost like each took a half. It wasn't good and evil. It was more like being out in the world and being reclusive. My twin being much more reclusive than I am, but he always enjoys hearing about what I've gone out to do. And I always enjoy hearing about his very simple, seemingly stress-free life, so we kind of feed off that with each other, but we never were envious of each other. I think because male and female helped with that. I've wondered if he were a woman, if I wouldn't have felt envy or competition or something.
Mhm. Wow, that's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
Well, you see, I don't think we can say that Violet and Game Boy are opposite, because they are polar. It's polarity,
Yeah.
but not opposition. And it is written much earlier that there was part of Violet in Game Boy and part of Game Boy in Violet. So they are interconnected, and it is meaningful that when Violet disappears, then Game Boy stays instead of her, but still she has something of Violet in herself. So, and all this makes the plot and the whole story much more, how would I say, full of something that we cannot describe. There is some part of Violet still there. She still stays there. It's not the in folk tales we often have the opposition of stepmother and stepdaughter, as in Cinderella and something like that. And this is full opposition. But here we don't have it. We have some connection. And when Lily starts to be anxious and she's afraid of something, we have those dark features in Lily as well. So it is much more interwoven, the whole story. And then when Game Boy turns to be Violet, or is it the right word? I don't know. Then we feel how deep was that connection, and we haven't read it.
Yeah, not yet. Yes. What you just said, it's interesting. It reminded me of the two spells, by Miss Thompson in the beginning, because she was the seer. She was able to see that connection and actually spell it out, in a spell, so to say. And so she was like I don't know if it was magic per se. It was more like she was able to see that incredible connection between the two and predict what might happen, how that's going to unfold. So,
and I remember the king said in the very, oh no, not yet. It was later.
It'll be later, yeah. So let's read on.
We have no magician we have no magician, we have only Miss Thompson.
Yes,
Well,
yes.
it will be later.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, because I remember the whole story from the beginning to the end. So,
Yeah. Yeah, that's okay. So shall we read on? Okay, chapter 8. When Princess Lily was between 7 and 8 years old, a curious thing happened in Mountaineer Castle. It was all the more remarkable because if there ever was anybody in the world who could be relied upon to behave in exactly the same way upon all occasions, morning and evening, year in and year out, Sundays and Christmas Day included, that body was Aunt Gamboy. You always knew just what she was going to wear, just what she was going to do, and just what she was going to say. For all you needed to do was to think carefully as she opened the door, the door of her mouth, what thing you most hoped she wouldn't wear, do, and say. And then she wore, did, and said it. But now, very slowly, as it seemed, she began to change. She would still snap the heads off the castle servants with her sharp tongue. She would still set the Lord Chamberlain and the Lord High Teller of the other from which, who had recently received the honorable title of Lord Tullywitch, and all the other noble lords of the land, by the ears with some ill-judged remark. She would still pour for hours over her black-bound book called Excerpta, and she would still feed the amalgamated princesses on aerated bread and desiccated coconut. But nevertheless, there was a change. And with Aunt Gamboy, any sort of change at all, even the tiniest one, was startling enough to everyone who knew her. She put on different clothes. She began to tie her hair with one piece of ribbon instead of 3 pieces of string. If she was talking to the king, or if she was talking to anyone else, and the king was within hearing, her voice would grow a little softer, and her tongue a little less sharp. Sometimes she was almost kind to him. On one occasion, she even said thank you instead of stuff, and the next night she filled his hot water bottle from her own kettle. No doubt she had noticed that what everyone else in the castle had begun to see, that King Courtesy, in spite of little Lily and her pretty pranks, was a sad and lonely man. As he grew older and more tired, he seemed to miss the queen more and more. And at night, when his work was over and he sat in the firelight, he would sometimes fancy she was there beside him, till one of the flames, leaping higher than before, would light up all the room and remind him that he was alone. This would always be long after Princess Lily had gone to bed. At such times he would sit by the hearth far into the night, his elbows upon his knees and his chin upon his hands, gazing into the fire until it turned gray and then black and he was shivery with cold. And then he would trudge wearily up to bed and lie awake till morning, wondering why he had been born. No doubt Aunt Gamboy had noticed all this. One blowing autumn afternoon, the king was out walking alone with Princess Lily. He was plodding slowly over the damp fields and footpaths of his demesne, with little Lily's small hand gripped tight in his big one, and little Lily's little legs hurrying along beside his large ones, two steps to one. And they were talking happily together of this and that and the other, and watching the round sun putting on his gorgeous red clothes before he went to bed. But when silence fell between them, the king began to puzzle to himself over the strange alteration in Aunt Gamboy's behavior, and he could not help thinking how pleasant it would be when the walk was over, to come back to the castle and find her waiting with a china tea made ready and the royal slippers warming by the fire, for she had taken lately to drinking tea with him. But Princess Lily had a bright little picture in her head, of the warm nursery with the blinds drawn and the fire flickering away behind the guard, and the Indian tea and thick bread and butter with a royal nurse. How nice it will be, she thought, not to have that horrid Aunt Gamboy fussing in and out, making drafts and banging the door. She always stays downstairs now, thank goodness. They walked on in silence. Suddenly Princess Lily stopped dead, threw up her hands, and screamed, a great scream. Her eyes and her mouth opened wider and wider, rounder and rounder. Once, twice, 3 times she screamed aloud. And then she raised herself up on tiptoe and down as she plopped backwards in a dead faint. The poor king was astonished. He snatched her up in his arms and turned to see what it could be that had frightened her so much. He looked all around, but there was nobody in sight. He looked all around again. Still he saw nothing. He looked all around again. And then he threw back his head and began to laugh. For lolloping along the side of the path, believe me, in the clumsiest and most ridiculous way imaginable, was a great gray-green toad. Lollopy-lump, lollopy-lump, lollopy-lump. But then the king suddenly understood what it was, that it was this which had frightened poor little Lily, and sent her off a-fainting. He stopped laughing and looked very gravely at his daughter lying in his arms. And now she slowly opened her eyes and asked wonderingly where she was and what had happened. "You are out for a walk with your father, and you've just seen a toad," said the king. "What's a toad?" asked Lily. And then King Courtesy, and you will remember that although he was not very clever, he was very wise, thought for a moment, and when he had thought, he looked bang into Princess Lily's eyes and said, Are you a brave little princess?" "Yes," said Lily, "I think so." The king put her on her feet, and taking her hand in his, said, "Now you're quite safe, and you know there's nothing to be frightened of when you are with me, don't you?" "Yes, your Majesty," said little Lily. "Are you quite sure?" "Yes, father." "Very well. That is a toad," said the king, pointing to it and watching his daughter to see what would happen. Well, her eyes began to open wider and wider, and her mouth to grow rounder and rounder, and she was just going to scream again. But the king pressed her hand tight to remind her that he was there, and this time she did not faint, though she felt little trembles running up and down all over her like mice. She just stood shivering and shaking like a leaf, hanging on the branch of a tree when the wind blows it about, and she would not look at the great gray-green toad lolloping along in the ditch. "Oh, father, take me home, she whimpered. So the king turned with her and walked toward home. How queer, thought the king, as they walked home, that a thing which makes one person laugh should make another scream and shiver. He could not understand it. He did not remember the little 2-day-old baby who only lay in a queen's bed and watched with wide open eyes the antics of that strange mechanical toad. Nor did Princess Lily herself remember it, for she had been so young then that her memory hadn't started. But somewhere inside her, somewhere behind those wide eyes, the jumping toad with its electric glare and her mother's loud scream in the dark had printed their mark. just as a picture is printed inside a picture machine. Though if you opened the machine, you would see nothing. This was the first time since then that she had seen a toad. Oh, if only she had listened to nobody but her father. For now His Majesty began to explain, as they walked along, that there was nothing to be frightened of in a toad, or indeed in any other God's creatures, except lions and tigers. Only weak and silly people scream when they see mice and spiders and toads, he said. All sensible people know that they are really just as beautiful as bees and butterflies and robins. But you must get to know them, and you mustn't be frightened. Then Princess Lily began to feel a little ashamed of herself. All the way home, the king talked to her in this way and promised to help her to be brave and untrembly, telling her stories of the way in which other people had conquered their fears. And when they reached the castle, Lily ran upstairs to the royal nursery for tea. She said nothing to her old nurse about the toad, because she felt she would rather not speak of it to anyone. She only wanted to forget all about it very quickly. King Courtesy opened the door to the tea hall and went in. He found Anne Gamboy sitting behind a table, waiting for him. She had put away her spectacles. Indeed, she hardly ever wore them now except in her own room. And she had left her black book upstairs. She hardly ever read it now except in her own room. And there she sat behind the table. Now, how like the queen she was. The king was beginning to notice this more and more, and sometimes when they sat alone together in one of the rooms in the castle, a great peace would come to him, and he would almost believe that Violet was with him again. If he looked very hard at Anne Gamboy at these times, he fancied her face changing under his very eyes. Not the features themselves, but the look on them seemed to slide and change, to change like the shape of a cloud, until he fell in a dream that his beloved queen herself was looking out at him through Gamboy's eyes. Then the world and the castle and the walls of the room would all seem very shadowy and far away, and he would dream on, wondering what might be the difference between life and death. He sat down at the table. Such a curious thing happened this afternoon when we were out for a walk, he said. What was it, my dear? Said Gamboy. Yes, and Gamboy called the king my dear. So he told her all that had happened, and of course she was very surprised, and told the king that she couldn't understand it at all. She quite agreed, she said, that little Lily must be taught to conquer her silly fear. It was not the thing, she said, for a princess to be afraid. She had never been afraid of toads, she said, or anything else, and she would do her best to cure her niece. That was the end of their talk on that matter. But Anne Gamboy knew more about toads than anybody else in the country. She had read about them in that black book of hers. There was a good deal of magic in that book. And of course, it was a black book. As it was a black book, it was black magic. It was because she knew so much about toads that she had sent the little fat podger into her sister's room on the night he finished his machine and got inside it. She had known well enough what would happen. That was why she had done it. And since that night, she had been reading, and reading. She had taken lately, as you know, to leaving her book upstairs, but she had not stopped reading it. When she was not smiling sweetly at the weary king or calling him my dear, you would have found her, if you had looked, upstairs in her room, horn-rimmed spectacles on nose, poring over her book and reading about toads. Oh dear, here's that horrid Anne Gamboy, thought Lily to herself, as she heard Anne Gamboy's footsteps coming upstairs to the royal nursery. Wow. So yeah, what I'm noticing is that yeah, first of all, Gamboy is starting to her, to implement her little plan to get rid of not just Lily, but her joy and her connection to being, and that she herself is practicing magic, or she has been practicing magic for quite a long time, because Owen Barfield mentions that she started reading her black book a long time ago, and she knew a thing or two about that side, the shadowy side of life, and it's when I first read it, it kind of blew my mind that uh, I would say, how would I put this? Hmm. That when you really when you really have chosen to be on the dark side of things, it really draws you in, and you keep going there, and the more steps you take, the harder it is to stop, and so anyway, just a thought. I mean, there's many thoughts connected to this black magic book of hers. But I was really surprised to see how meticulous her plan was, to begin with. Do you have any thoughts?
Well, I think it's an interesting contrast between like the symbol of the Black Book and then Lily's connection to nature. And one of the metaphors I noticed in this chapter, again, he brought up the leaf metaphor. And in the previous chapter, she was very connected to the leaf, like she embodied the leaf in a dance. And Gamboy looked down on it, and then so she put the leaf away. I mean, she put the dress away that symbolized the leaf. And then in this chapter, he has the metaphor of her just like barely hanging on from a branch. So it's almost like symbolic that she has lost touch with her connection to the vitality of nature, and she's being cut off. And once again, Gamboy enters the picture and sort of replacing this, vivid, vital connection with nature. She suddenly kind of comes under the sway of the book, the black magic book is sort of starting to become the dominant symbol.
Yeah, that's interesting. A leaf, yeah. Oh.
Yeah, like kind of that spontaneous response being replaced by, the manipulation of magic
Mhm.
that has fallen outside of the relationship, but it's trying to control nature, not interact with it or
Mhm.
respond to it.
Yeah, what struck me as well is that Prince Courtesy tells Lily how silly her fear is in the first place. That basically, if you get to know the thing that you are afraid of, you might find out there's no reason to fear it. And that's really something that I've seen in my life as well. There's like, when I'm afraid of something, I usually don't know what it is that I'm afraid of. And this fear is created by me not really wanting to take the step to know, to learn, and look this thing in the face. Because shadows rely on me not seeing it. And but the moment I see the shadow, it kind of loses it's not scary anymore. But we tend to run away from our own shadow, and from all kinds of shadows.
That might apply to Lily too, because when she sees the frog, it becomes a horror to her. But if she learned about frogs, it would dissipate the fear. But she's so horrified by it, and maybe something from the past, some relived trauma from her early time, blinds her just facing it and using that part of the brain that, she and her mother uh, probably didn't activate as much, the sort of the science, the touching the ground for the reality of it, and more living too much in the part where it's all dreamy and fantastical. And it's again an imbalance on I'm maybe making too much of it, but just the fact that the king or somebody could really take her in hand and say, "Look, he's amazing. Look what frogs do, and frogs are wonderful, and don't be afraid." She's not accessing that now, and then she can be taken advantage of by the person who has ill will toward her.
Yeah. And then Gamboy kind of blows this whole thing out of proportion. And
Yeah.
it's interesting that she chose the toad as the symbol of getting blown. The toad blows itself up,
Yeah.
to seem bigger than she is,
Yeah.
and usually our fears are, blown out of proportion, something that we don't really know,
Yeah,
and it blows out of
exactly.
proportion. Yeah. So. And the less we know it, the more of a narrative we have running through our minds about how dreadful it is.
And the more others can scare us.
Yeah, yeah.
So she's put the little girls in a very vulnerable place right now. She's open to the danger that her aunt might craft for her.
Mhm.
Yeah, and it's also an interesting symbol that it was a mechanical toad that killed her mother, because sometimes these little fears can take on a life of their own and become mechanical. So
Yeah.
we're not responding to reality anymore. We're responding to this mechanical complex in our own heads.
It
Well,
wasn't even a real toad, yeah.
Mhm.
I think about I mean, maybe again, too much to be made of it, but the the machine that's we're all in fear of now, the AI, the world being run by mechanics rather than human authority. And it's just amazing how much fear is in the air about it when you read the jobs that'll be lost, though it'll take over the world, it'll let off the bombs. Everyone's afraid of the mechanical right now, what they can't control. Although
Yeah,
they
that's
can.
interesting. I mean, I've never thought about that, but it makes sense.
Yeah. Mm.
Yeah. Well, that's also interesting to me is that this whole interaction between Prince Courtesy and Lily, that he is doing his job pretty well, it
Mm.
seems. That he is kind of saying, just hold my hand, and I'm going to comfort you and assure you that there's nothing to fear. As long as I'm with you, there's nothing to fear. So I really enjoy, when I read that, I really enjoyed how he handled this.
Yeah.
But there is a part of him that is absent, because I believe because he had lost the Silver Trumpet, and
Mm.
basically he became pretty vulnerable to this whole weariness thing.
Mm.
Owen Barfield kind of emphasizes that he's weary and kind of feels old, and life kind of has gone out of him, and he wants to find some sort of comfort. He's kind of settled in without Violet and without the joy that he had. He could kind of, settled down, settled in for whatever he had. But then you can't really continue living like that. You need to have some sort of, comfort, you know. And then Gamboy, of course, becomes that sort of substitute or surrogate comfort for him. But as Maria said, actually, the part of this ploy, this trick, is that Violet is still present in Gamboy,
Mhm.
and the dreaminess and the fantasies that Prince Courtesy is having when he looks her in the eyes is not like a dream. It's reality. He's actually able to see reality. It's not just a dream,
Hmm.
you know.
Mm.
But he's still deceived because he does not have this ability to see through. He still looks at, not through.
Mhm.
Yeah, and because of that, he cannot protect his daughter from Gamboy. So he leaves
Oh,
her open up to, to Gamboy preying on her.
hmm.
So it's almost like his weariness. He wants to be a good father and he holds his daughter's hand, but he can't, he doesn't have that energy to really protect her and to see through Gamboy's appearances
Hmm.
because he's still just so caught up in the need for Violet to be there.
Yeah, yeah. And then interesting that he kind of defers to Gamboy at the end to handle this whole situation. When she promises, "I will cure her of her fears." Why would a father even think of deferring that important, such an important task to somebody who's been mean to him for years,
Yeah.
just because
Yeah.
of this fancy that he has, or that need to kind of appease him or whatever, comfort himself.
Mhm.
You know.
Well, uh, I think it was important what you said. You started to say something about the evil. You know, when a person has evil plans or evil thoughts and so on, as Gamboy, she had a plan, an evil plan, how to destroy Violet and well to scare her and so when we come to this point, now she takes the place of Violet, and she's not comforted because at such situations, at such moments, not a person has evil thoughts, but the evil starts to work itself.
Yeah.
So not it's not Gamboy who is driven by evil, but evil drives her. Now she's not controlling the situation. The
Hmm.
evil itself starts to work.
Hmm.
So she cannot be comforted. She cannot be quiet, sitting next to the king and being a Violet. So exactly,
Right.
she comes to the position of Violet, but she
Mhm.
cannot stop because the evil starts to work itself.
Hmm.
And
That's
now
really
it brings, well, I will not say where it brings. I'm sorry, I have to leave you. It's rather late here. Uh,
Oh,
so it was very nice to meet all of you. Thank you for
Thank
inviting.
you so
thank you for
much.
coming,
you.
Maria.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Thank
so good to have come back sometime if you
Mhm.
have
Thank
time.
you. I,
Yeah. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye. Good night.
Good night. Yeah. So yeah, I remember reading somewhere in Divine Comedy this very thought that Maria just mentioned, that basically uh, evil he keeps its secret very, very well, guards its secret. And the secret of evil is that we think that we can instrumentalize evil to achieve some good, but we cannot. The moment we actually start choosing evil, evil chooses us and takes over, and we become what we do in the end. So it's kind of an interesting thought that
oh, yeah.
uh, most evil done is done in the name of good, but it ends up, I mean, it ends up being more evil.
Yeah, and there's a great quote. I think it's from Confucius or something that don't fight evil with evil because evil has instruments of its own, but it's the way to fight evil is making energetic progress in the good.
Hmm.
And you have to, throughout one's life, you have to keep remembering that kind of theory because if you just go near it or try to react to it, you get entangled in it. You
Exactly.
know, it it's so destructive. It's like a spider web. So, and I liked her point, Maria's point, that the person who had let that seed grow in herself is sort of out of control of controlling it at this point. It's turning into controlling her, maybe.
Yeah, and that's a really interesting contrast to the prince who, like, he just has sort of goodness, he never protects it. So Gamboy is always noticing, and she's very alert and always looking for the next opportunity, and she can't really sit still. But on the opposite, or I don't know, opposite is the right word, but the prince is falling asleep and he has no energy, and he can't he can't protect the goodness that he has. And Gamboy is just starting to take it over. He falls into sort of this unconscious, yeah, you just take care of my daughter for me kind of thing.
Yeah, she's almost like a stepmother now, that's moving into, and even that she is twin to the dead mother, she's taking over the mother role, and he's letting that happen. That's pretty scary. I mean, it's very fairy tale like.
Yeah, yeah. But it's also interesting that I mean, it's common life. It happens. I mean, I see it. I know people. I know myself. I know that it's really like very archetypal.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh,
And I'm repeating myself. I really like the point she made about it now controlling her, because I can think of people too, one in particular who I feel has plans that are not, right for everybody, but is almost out of control of figuring out that that's the situation, that it's, and that kind of takes a little burden off looking at the other and blaming them so heartily, because there's energy involved that maybe they're not aware of and they can't control. So
and yes, and we can all feel that energy because,
yeah,
like you said, Mary. I mean, if we see some evil going on, and instead of pursuing good, we kind of start bickering with it. We start
yeah,
kind of opposing it. We
yeah,
get entangled. There's almost like a um, power that gets a hold of you from
yeah,
outside to perpetuate more evil and fight evil with evil.
yeah,
You know what I mean? And
yeah,
and
yeah,
it's a force that we all can feel the moment we decide, now this is an outrage. I'm going to use my own rage to
yeah,
oppose this outrage.
yes,
And then of course we end up where we are.
yes. That's, a whole country can do that. A
Yeah.
person, a family, a community, a country.
Yeah.
It's the world right now.
Yeah.
I also noticed another interesting thing. It's when Game Boy was trying to look and behave like Violet. It says that then the world and the castle and the walls of the room would all seem very shadowy and far away for the prince. And he would dream on, wondering what might be the difference between life and death. I was thinking, what does it mean that he was wondering what might be the difference between life and death? And I'm thinking that it's interesting that there was life in Violet, but she was dead at that moment. And it looks like all the ways of Gamboy like are dead ways. Like she's like, I mean, she's not producing life around herself. She's not producing life in herself, but she's like representation of, or I mean, maybe she was just, all her ways were about bringing death, but she is the only one alive around him. And now he's mixing in his head life and death. And I think he gets confused. He gets this confusion. Here is this lady, and her ways are not life, but she's the one who is seemingly alive. And his wife, who had so much life in herself, she's obviously dead. And then when confusion comes and he lets that lady take place of his wife and like lets her take care of his daughter, I think he let this confusion to happen, and he like, I don't care what is life or death, I don't care what is good or wrong. I think he let this confusion kind of just calm.
Yeah,
I
that's
think
interesting.
that's true.
Right.
Hmm.
Yeah, I was
that's a good
thinking about that ending part too, and you explained it really well. His confusion and where that's coming from. And like, how do we apply that to the world around us today in our own lives too? Like, where do we get confused about appearances? And,
Yeah.
maybe that's one way to judge whether something's good or not is, does it bring life around you? But then you have people like Hitler. I mean, when he was in power, the economy was doing really good. And, he was actually, people were like having work again, and people, he was starting youth organizations, and he seemed really good to the people, to the Germans at that time. And yet, behind the scenes, he was creating death camps and
Yeah.
um, so it can be very confusing sometimes when
Yeah.
you are people in the middle of something. Like, is this something good that's happening to all of us, or is it something bad? And I think a lot of times, like the prince, we just sort of like, oh, like I don't know.
Yeah.
I
You
know,
know?
and I think I was actually talking to a priest about this week, an Orthodox priest, and going, "Oh my gosh, what are we going to do? The world's falling apart." And he's saying you can only start with yourself, and if you're working on yourself, it's going to light up somebody else. And it's the ripple effect. You start, unless you're actually a politician with power or somebody who has power, but your
Yeah.
life is not taking that route. You start with yourself. And it's not like putting your head in the sand like the prince or sleeping. It's like, okay, I'll concentrate on my own um, faults and ways and try to do good, and then maybe the next person will be doing good, and the next, and you grow it out from your family and into your community. I mean, that's the ideal. And whatever your work in life is, you try to bring it to that um, where you are in charge and have power, and then try to keep from really hating opponents or people who are quote enemies, and just, I mean, that's the hardest part in our culture today in America is the hatred of one side against another, and it's just always bubbling up and being fed by the media. Pull back from that, maybe reach for literature, theology, or something where it doesn't go in that sewer so quickly.
Mhm.
But that's hard too, because it's an interesting show. You want to keep tuning in to see the next chapter. We've never had such a fast moving drama as the last 10 or 15 years. So anyway, it's, I think it's on everyone's mind that I know how to function.
Yeah.
It's
I'm also thinking that the king was so ready to give his control to Gamboy, where he didn't have to. I mean, he could hold his control, and I mean, he could take care of his daughter himself.
Yeah.
But because he led this confusion, and like, yeah, he was like, what is life or death, whatever. He was ready to give his control to Gamboy, but he could do good himself. I mean, he could uh, just hold to the goodness in himself and do good to his daughter and take care of her. But he was so ready to just give control to somebody who seemed good, and why not doing it yourself? It's your daughter.
Right.
He could kick Gamboy out of the kingdom. I mean, he could remove the source of darkness that he's blinding himself to at the moment, and then try to reorder his castle and his family. that's the urge of the reader, I think, is get rid of that
Yeah.
woman. She's not,
But
Yeah,
you
she's
yeah.
know, my
stubborn.
experience is you cannot get rid of people.
They
I
keep
mean, I
coming
just
back.
think we all have people, regardless of politics, we all have people like, in our work world or our neighbors or our family members that, are just like, or maybe ourselves, other people, there's narratives constantly going on, and we have to figure out, um, we have to make choices in the middle of all of that. And I really do like the idea of sometimes we just have to, instead of trying to figure out if this person's good or bad or whatever, we just have to do good ourselves.
Yeah.
Like, maybe there's just one thing good you can do. Like in the prince's case, he should have maybe forgotten about Violet and took on his daughter as his, appreciated for who she was, instead of trying to like make her Violet.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. That's a good
You
point.
wonder though, um could he accept her Gamboy for who she is if she's destructive? That I think that brings your point more alive
yeah,
that
like what do you do with Gamboy? Like if
yeah.
she's there, what do you do with
Well,
her? And
he knew what to do with her. He just lost this thing. He could have easily, if he had the Silver Trumpet, he knew what affects her deeply,
oh, right.
and he lost it. And I think it's an incredible symbolism there, because if I think of a situation like somebody irritates me, or somebody like I don't like, what somebody's doing, and I'm stuck with that person. I mean, there's nothing I can do. I can either be pulled into the opposition by this force, like, I will use my rage to oppose your outrage or something like that. And then, of course, I will become evil, just as evil, and evil will multiply, you know. Or I can pick up my silver trumpet, and that's just interesting to think what it is. And
Mm,
uh, it's like what Mary said. It's like you engage in what? In the good that you can be and do yourself this very moment.
mhm.
And it is constructive, and it is growing something. And it eludes description, of course. I mean, I mean, hence the metaphor, the silver trumpet. You can't really define what it is. But I think pretty much it's the light of consciousness in the
Mhm.
final analysis. Because if this moment right now, if I am willing uh, to pursue whatever God makes available to me that is good and lovely and beautiful in the moment, then that is the thing that will ultimately break that spell,
Yeah,
you know.
Mm.
I believe that's true.
Uh, which is the hardest thing. It's just counterintuitive sometimes, especially in the moment, with all those forces pulling us.
Oh, it's like they get hooks in you, and you have to pull that out where some outrage, and you can find outrage in 2 seconds just looking at anything on the internet, and there's a magnet. It's at the same time you say to yourself, "Oh, I shouldn't, have that piece of candy," but next thing you know, you're stuffing it in your mouth, and it's control of all your appetites in a weird way too.
Hmm.
Um, that you have to work on. It's not easy. I think it's really a challenge, but there's no other way right now. The way our world is so upside down, and especially if you have people in your life like young people or relatives that you want to show a way toward or model behavior for, it's even more of a challenge.
Yeah, sometimes I think of Owen Barfield writing this in 1923 and then publishing in 1925. So he's already seen the First World War,
Yeah,
and so much unconsciousness and the shock that it produced.
yeah.
But maybe he could feel the Second World War brewing, in the
Yeah.
air as well,
Yeah.
because many people saw it coming,
Yeah.
like
Well, that
Johann
was it.
Huizinga.
Wasn't that when Hitler just began to get, some power, just
Yeah.
came into the public eye? And it was after a catastrophe in Europe. And I was reading the other day that mass psychosis, the contagion of, say anti-Semitism or something of that nature, can take over after world events that are catastrophic. So, for instance, in America in the South, after the Civil War, um, you got Jim Crow, which was so awful, the hatred and fear of the masses that couldn't think for themselves. And I think we can look at that as a guide of how to think for yourself in the midst of kind of a mobs mentality. And of course, that's not an issue in the book, but it probably was on his mind, seeing
Mhm.
things. And think of the other
Yeah,
influence.
because he did kind of fall into unconsciousness, and he forgot about his trumpet.
Yeah,
And so maybe that's one thing that we can do. I mean, most of us aren't politicians or we don't make big world decisions, but we can, yeah, try to not be part of that mass, like everybody running
Psychosis.
off the
Yeah.
cliff. Like the Jim Crow laws were a really good example where
yeah,
the whole entire South just came to this consensus that, Black people are to blame for the war and Black people are inferior and my family is from the South, so I mean, it was just this like everybody believed it. And if you stood up against it, you were definitely doing, I don't know. I just think even harboring, changing the stories that we tell, for example, can start changing things when we're at the very grassroots level. That we can't change. Like I can vote once a year, I mean, every 4 years, but otherwise, you can be an
well,
activist, I guess, but
yeah. And my family's from the South too, and I saw some of it firsthand. And it's inexplicable unless you think that people had lost their minds,
Yeah.
that there was an irrationality that took over. The same in Germany. Um, I today sometimes when I'm really low, I think that highly progressive atmospheres like that, like the censorious nature of it, and in my community, it's extremely liberal. To even speak a doubt or an opinion is, I mean, people just wouldn't invite you back to dinner.
Mhm.
It's that strict now up in New England, this area. Sort of a New York City mentality of people who've moved up here. But you just learn not to speak about things that you question or you want to know more facts about, unless you've got a few trusted people you can talk to. But I've never known it like this before. And, all the years of growing up and living through the cultural revolution of kids, in the 70s and when I went to college and everything, it's never been this alienated, parts of the country from each other. um, Family members being banned from homes, people not talking to their parents anymore, people, just going off the deep end in their irrational responses to things.
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting because Ina and I have had very, very similar situations with some of our friends in Russia over this whole war going on between
Yeah,
Russia and Ukraine. And literally, as you say, families are divided
yeah,
over this issue.
yeah,
And like literally, you just don't know what to talk about.
yeah. And you
uh,
don't know quite what the other person thinks until, some hint is given and you know what not to say
yeah,
and what you're allowed to say.
yeah.
Yeah, it's true. But the whole world seems that way right now. That's what I
Uh,
find so
yeah.
interesting. Think of Europe, and I mean, I
Mm,
don't know enough about what's going on in Asia, but certainly in Europe and America, and as you say, Russia, there's such division among peoples of each land.
mhm, mhm.
Um,
Yeah.
you.
And
Yes.
I think this book is very symbolic. That what happens when you put down your silver trumpet. When you
Yeah.
this silver trumpet, whatever it was, I don't know if you discussed some ideas what it might be, but it was definitely his compass in life, some compass that like would lead him through every situation. But he put it down on the day of his wedding because he felt like, I'm happy enough, I don't need any compass anymore.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
Mhm.
and whatever compass it was, like common sense or his faith, or I don't know, whatever it was, there are many like possibilities of what it might be, but he put it down, and that didn't go well.
And it's such a lovely image of a silver trumpet, and everyone has one, right? And I'm lucky because I write books for kids, so doing having a silver trumpet is just part of my life. You know, it's
Mhm.
just something I keep doing. But and my husband's a musician, and you know my friends are in the theater, so there's a lot of trumpeting, but at the same time, they need to sometimes put down their trumpet and look at reality because
Mhm.
there's so much uh what would be the word? Just uplifting of consciousness and funniness and humor and everything, but there's a not knowing what's going on behind them. And when you come to tell them the news, um, they don't want to hear it. You know, they just totally I don't want to know what's going on out there. I don't want to know the facts. I don't want to know this because it upsets me too much. And
Mhm.
you want to integrate some of these things, you know, into a
Mhm.
more balanced view. But
Mhm.
um,
Yeah, that's interesting that you say that. Usually, when I know what my silver trumpet is and I use it and I blow it, right? Trumpet. Uh, yeah, it may become a sort of escape for sure. But at the same time, it strengthens me to be able to look this toad in the face
oh, that's good. Yeah.
and say, this is just a mechanical thing,
Yeah.
or whatever, just a funny
Right.
little thing that's blowing up for whatever reason. And when you were talking about Mary, I thought we're living in a very unique time because of the internet and the ability of the internet to amplify narratives
Yeah.
to such a degree that it also feels like a toad being inflated,
Oh yeah,
growing.
one event will set the world on fire, you know, like
Hmm.
George Floyd that summer of 2020. One event because everybody could see it all of a sudden and then
Yeah. Yeah.
um lose their minds in one way or another. And that's what's happening periodically now, I find, is
Mhm.
there's an event of some nature that triggers an explosion of of hatred and fear and if you're not totally conscious of what the facts are or hearing some balance, you go down the rabbit hole. You know, you just can't control it. I've seen that. And yeah, you're right. This time is totally unique, I think, in history because the communication between globally is just any separation or spacing of time
Yeah.
has been shattered.
And then
And
we also seem to kind of it comes out in the book as well,
yeah,
because Gamboy is really good at weaving a narrative, as
yeah.
we're going to see later on as she deals with Lily. I mean, it's when I was translating it, gave me like shivers the way
Mm,
she weaves a narrative.
yeah.
But Prince Courtesy is almost silent. He's either in his head, so we don't hear him except those couple of lines that he tells his daughter, which are really, sound. They're really really healthy. I mean, you want him to continue. You want him to go on speaking like that because there's so much light of consciousness, and then he kind of gets weary and goes his own way. And so there's not enough narrative there. and Gamboy's narrative takes over eventually.
That's brilliant. I mean, that's the best point, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, and I really think like for me, kind of the message almost is I have to work really hard to preserve that connection to what's really vital. You know, just like the leaf is connected to the tree.
Mhm.
Um, I can't let certain narratives like cut me off from the vitality of that. I just love those metaphors of being connected to, of Lily being connected to nature,
Yeah.
because I do think that we do have to protect that innocence and that capacity to be connected to something outside of um, like all the mechanisms of propaganda. And there are some genuinely really issues out there that have to be faced. It's not about like hiding and pretending they don't exist, but it's because there are lions and tigers out there, but we can't like, and we have to face those, but we can't be diverted by like mechanical fears of little frogs.
Yeah, that's right.
And I think part of wisdom is being able to distinguish between what do we really need to fight and what is just a diversion. Because I do think that a lot of times bad players um, play up on that. Like they get us all worked up about something that doesn't matter. And in the meantime, they're doing things that really do matter that we should be facing and dealing with.
Yeah, I love that because I think going just out into the yard and breathing the fresh air and even feeling the rain or the snow that we've had is a touchstone to come back to every day. If I can get away from my addiction of, the screens, um, and to give that to children and the facts of right now about how much exposure to the outside children are getting, it's absolutely horrendous, 5 minutes a day, whereas we lived outside when we were growing up through all seasons. But we've got to get that animated for the world. I don't know how to do that, but I think a lot of people come to that on their own, hiking and getting outside and whatever they can do to get by a river or water,
It's
something that
interesting that both princesses have like their names mean like a flower.
yeah,
Lily is a flower and Violet is a flower.
yes, good
As
point.
as opposed to
Yeah.
Gamboy is, Owen told us is basically like this lower part of this instrument where the pedals were. So she's kind of a peddling something, I don't
Oh, that's
know.
Right.
funny.
Anyway,
Oh,
so
that's
thank you
good.
guys. It's been an hour
Thank
and a
you
half. I
guys.
don't
It
want to keep you too much
Thank you.
longer.
was nice to see you, Inna. Is
Nice
it
to meet you.
Yeah,
Inna
nice to
or
meet you and see
is
you
it
too.
Inna or Ina?
Ina.
Ina. Okay, great. Hope you
That's my
will be
mother's
back.
name. Yeah,
Oh, really?
well, her name is Ina.
Mm.
Oh,
Mhm.
Ina. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, Ina comes from
I
innocent.
love that name.
Innocent.
Yeah,
Innocence.
Oh,
yeah.
beautiful.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Yeah.
Like Lily.
Yes, 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 yes. Yeah. And
Uh,
our oldest daughter is Violet, actually.
Oh my
no.
gosh.
Is
Yeah.
that
Yes.
that's too much?
Yeah, 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 yes, yes, yes.
That's lovely.
Yeah.
Great.
Well, thank
Well,
you guys.
yeah, see you next time.
Okay,
Hopefully,
good. Look
Thank
yeah.
you,
forward to
Dean,
it.
for
Thank you.
hosting this.
Bye
Absolutely,
bye.
absolutely. Bye-bye. Good day.
Bye.
Bye.